Hello, hello. Thank you everybody for joining us today. This is going to be really fun. We have two experts on the line here, Zach Bradford of Cleanspark and Kristy-Leigh Minehan, a world expert in crypto mining. People are still filtering in, but since y'all are slowpokes, we're going to start. I will also be monitoring your chat and looking for any questions you guys have, but for the most part, I am just leading you guys off as your host right now. So I'm Leah Wald. I'm the CEO of Valkyrie. Valkyrie is a digital asset management firm with a series of cryptocurrency trusts, SMAs, ETFs, and a DeFi hedge fund. But today we are going to talk about mining, which is a particular focus of Valkyrie right now for a couple reasons. I am going to hand it off to our guests after a quick introduction. And they are going to lead a fireside chat led by Kristy-Leigh to Zach. And we are going to learn, as everybody saw from the title, specifically sustainable mining. As everybody knows, there's a big smear on the Bitcoin mining industry, it not being environmentally friendly. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, we will have either debunked that or solidified it, hopefully not. But we'll definitely, have gotten into the meat of some good questions and answers and really we can all come out together understanding this issue much better. So without further ado, Zach, Kristy-Leigh, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
thank
you very much.
Thank you, Zach. And
go ahead.
No, please. So I actually just wanted to hear about an intro from you guys first. So Kristy-Leigh, did not mean to cut you off. And moreover, can you tell everybody a little bit about your very prolific, impressive background?
No. I am never good at introductions. So hi, Kristy. Got a girl in the crypto mining space. Got started in Bitcoin mining professionally in 2010. And my main focus has always been around optimizing kernels, optimizing miners, and eventually optimizing hardware. I've had the pleasure to work with Genesis Mining, now Genesis Digital Assets previously. Got to work with Core Scientific. Spent a lot of time working on writing proof of work algorithms and working on consensus algorithm design. And I am delighted to be Valkyrie's technical advisor on all things mining and staking.
And we're honored for that. And the humble Kristy-Leigh, she was the CTO at Core Scientific, actually. And just a quick note there for everybody on the call, since you've been in mining since 2010, when did Bitcoin first get released?
2009.
Okay, so the complete origins, Kristy's been around for it, which is just fantastic. So lots of probably horror stories in there as well.
Yes.
And Zach, it's a real pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Cleanspark?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm co-founder of Cleanspark, been with the company since 2014. My background's actually in finance and in energy. So, where Kristy has this depth of experience that goes back almost to the beginning of Bitcoin, I'm a fairly recent convert to Bitcoin myself. So, about 2 years ago, really getting exposed to it and, really led the company to acquiring a Bitcoin mining facility. And we've dove in, all in on the Bitcoin mining ever since. So really excited to be here. Excited to talk a lot more about the energy side. So I'll save a little bit of that till we get into it, but really appreciate being here.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Kristy. So I am now going to be an attendee, which makes me very happy today. Kristy-Leigh, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk with Zach. And again, thank you guys for being here today.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Zach, let's kick it off. I want to hear all about Cleanspark. Who are you guys? Why do you like Bitcoin? And what is your mission in this space?
Oh, that's great. Cleanspark. So Cleanspark, if you go back to our origins, we're an energy company. And that's why I love Bitcoin so much. If you really look at Bitcoin and what the proof of work really means, we're taking the value of energy and we're storing that inside Bitcoin. And, when I first got exposed, it was because, we were building efficient energy and optimization software and systems for businesses of all kinds, both data centers and non-data center properties. And I flew into Georgia in February of 2020 to sit down with a facility owner. And when I expected it to be, a regular data center property, we walked through and I got to see that they were doing Bitcoin mining. Now, that individual, Bernardo Schuchman, which you may know because he's been in Bitcoin just about as long as you, COVID happened a month later, and I spent the next year communicating with him and getting a real education on the value that it brings. But really, at the end of the day, how a Bitcoin mining company, operates and produces profit is all about the efficiency between the energy and the actual production. So where are we today? We have 19,000 servers that are all operating to, solve algorithms to support the blockchain. And so what that translates to, because I know many of the people listening may not be familiar with, Bitcoin mining and what it really means. So those 19,000 servers, they're all trying to solve equations. And we process just under 2 exahash of processing power right now. So what's an exahash? The easiest way to think about it is that's 1 quintillion transactions a second per exahash. So all of our servers are trying to solve the blockchain to support it and what it does. And that uses a lot of power, and the power is the main cost. And that gets to what Cleanspark is at its core. We are a sustainable Bitcoin mining company. And, we should probably dive into what sustainability means, but I'll give it the 1,000-foot view. But, it basically means we're conscious of the type of power we use and how we're using that power and what it really means. Because that's really important to us because, we can't avoid the power usage. And so it's about using it in the most conscientious, responsible way possible.
And what's your power mix right now? How much renewables, or is it all renewables?
We have 3 sites. One site is backed by hydropower. Because it's connected to the utility, it's about 99% renewable. Anytime you're connected to the grid, there's electrons getting mixed together, so it's really hard to get to 100%, but we're as close as we can get there. We have another facility, and it is backed by nuclear power, which we consider a clean source. And I'd love to, if we want to talk about that, happy to do so. I'm actually really big on nuclear. I think it's one of the answers that we need for a long-term carbon-free future. So it's about 95% backed as reported by, the power providers to us, leaving that 5%, non-renewable, non-clean mix. But even that 5% is mostly made up of solar with an intermix of, other sources. And then our other facility, it's, 26, 30% nuclear and clean back. But what we do there is we actually buy carbon credits. And I know that's not the perfect answer to everything, but we buy it for the entire load, including the renewable portion. So we feel, even though it's not the perfect solution, we're actually taking that facility to really a carbon negative point of view. So that's, our total mix, you bring it all together, we're above 90% clean and carbon free.
Geez, man, that is amazing. That actually puts you right at the top of the US miners that I know when it comes to renewables. And I think we actually have some pictures of your infrastructure, your farms, because I want to get those up there so that everyone kind of in the audience can see the absolute sheer scale and the design that goes into these data centers. And why don't you talk a little bit about this design, these antlers, and kind of, this isn't a traditional data center at all. When we think of data centers, we think of, buildings and tons of racks of machines. And this is something very unique and customized. So talk to us a little bit about your facility in Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited, actually. What you're seeing right now is the latest build out. So to put this in scale too, this is about 30 megawatts of power that's on this specific site here. And we are air cooling the machines. And that's why we're sitting in these very industrial looking boxes. And inside that box, there's a row of miners, and the miners are servers that are, processing that power. Now, why are we putting them outside, and why are we air cooling them? Why are we not putting them inside what you would see traditionally, where it's, air conditioning or chair cooled? And it comes down to efficient use of energy. And when we measure this, we measure what is the load that serves the cooling and what is the load that serves the miners. And we, internally we call it the parasitic load. And the goal is you want to use as little of the total energy for cooling of these computers, and you want to take them, then redirect all that power to support the actual processing. And so what we have here is we've developed, right now what you're seeing is where the air is coming out of these containers. On the other side are 5-foot tall fans that are actually creating negative pressure in the space to pull the air through. So you end up with a hot side of each of these containment units and a cold side that's pulling through the air. So it's about the quantity of air that we're passing over the microchips. And that allows us to use essentially ambient air temperature to cool these down, instead of needing to bring the temperature of that air down to process over the chips. So, I know this probably better than, almost anybody, but it really is all about the efficiency of cooling the system, of cooling these microchips and keeping them processing at very high rates. So that's how this facility in particular that we're looking at is set up.
For our audience, I mean, just to compare this to something like Google, as Zach said, there's so much energy poured into trying to cool these servers traditionally, whether it's GPU servers, FPGAs, just traditional data centers, and it is not passive air. And so your PUE is never kind of at a parity of 1. And mining data centers, especially in the US, are the closest we've ever been able to get to a PUE of 1, which means that it is the closest we've gotten to a truly energy efficient data center. And they're actually studied quite frequently by data center designers from Google, from NVIDIA, from AMD, figuring out, okay, how are you cooling this insane amount of equipment with just air? And Zach, have you explored doing anything with kind of the hot air waste?
We have, there's a lot of ways where you can really bring that hot air and you can transition it, whether it's to, use the heat to, heat water that then creates energy there. We've looked at a variety of things. And actually, if you go back to, some of our historical past, that was something that we were doing a lot with some of the bigger data centers. What we found for our particular purpose is there's some interesting things to do. But at our current situation, we don't have any plans to do things with the waste heat yet. But I can say that that's very much something that we're monitoring opportunities of. We've talked to groups about, pushing it over to a greenhouse to grow vegetables, to push it over to heating systems. There, in one of our facilities, there's actually a recreation center next door. Theoretically, we could heat the pool with this waste heat and things like that. So these are things that we think about, but the concrete side of, what we would do with that right now, there's a lot of really cool ideas, but we haven't put anything to practice quite yet.
Got it. And since we have up on the screen kind of this picture of this ASIC miner, just want to again highlight how efficient this design is. So this is what we call in hardware the tube. And essentially it's an intake fan on the front, which is sucking in all of the cold air. And then there's a fan on the back of this box. And that's it. That's all there is to a Bitcoin miner. And it's one of the most efficient designs we've seen in computing. today, because there's no having to deal with fans pushing against each other, or negative airflow, or even backflow if your facility is really well designed. Fantastic. Very clean design, man. Very, very clean farm.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and to your point, what you said, we try and create the pressure to pull through on this, because backflow for the people listening to this, that's the heat coming back and transferring back through to create inefficiencies. Now you got to cool it down more. It takes more time. The other thing that we tried to design in our system is, the fans on all these units take power themselves. And if we can create the right, flows with larger fans instead of those small fans, we can make those so they don't have to work quite as hard to always keep things cooled down. So that's something we're also playing around with from our air pressure side of things. That's always fun.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And talk to us a little bit about this picture here.
Yeah.
Because that looks like oil cooling, or...
Yeah, we're actually really excited about a project that we're doing right now, which is immersion cooling. So,
nice.
For everybody listening, what does immersion cooling mean, and why would it be interesting? So, if you look at the picture here, one thing you're going to see that's lacking is the real fans that we were just talking about. And when you put something into a liquid cooling system, there's the potential, when you think about physics and, heat transfer, liquid can actually transfer heat almost 1,000 times more efficiently than air can. And so, because it's touching everything, so, it becomes the temperature of what's around it. Now, you look at that and you're seeing a clear liquid, and, it's not water. It is, an oil-based. The easiest way to think about the oils that we're using is like a mineral oil. It's biodegradable, it's a non-toxic, which is, of course, is an important part of also being sustainable. The last thing we really want to do is use something that is then damaging. Now, these systems are also closed loop. So we're not taking water, heating it up and pushing it out. What instead we're doing is we're taking this liquid, this mineral oil-like liquid, and we're circulating it through a closed loop system so that none of it's ever wasted. And it goes through a cooling system that's similar to the radiator in your car. You're not always having to top off the antifreeze, but instead those cooling coils go through and cool down the liquid. And so we're actually building a site right now. It's going to be, a small is relative, but it'll be 20 megawatts of immersion cooling on a building that we have also just outside of Georgia in Norcross. So it's incredibly efficient. It really gets, as Kristy said, as close to that efficiency of 1 that we're looking for. We're really aiming to try and get this system at 1.01 or 1.02. Time will tell as we kind of tweak and fine tune it. Something I'm also really excited about, in addition to just having a highly efficient liquid cooled system, is this facility in particular. I looked at the designs yesterday. We're going to be putting renewables on site for generation. So we're actually going to be putting almost 1,800 solar panels to help support this. Now, that's only going to be about 0.5 megawatt of the 20 megawatts, but we're going to take that facility to not only consuming, hopefully a clean mix from the utility, but adding our own power on site that is powered by the sun. So we're really excited about this being a really good case study of closed loop systems, high efficiency, and on-site power generation.
That is phenomenal. And I mean, the other advantage of immersion cooling is now you're also going to be able to push those units, overclocking them,
Yes.
More, up to low end 20% more than the stock or factory units, all the way up to 40 to 50% more. And so you're going to be producing more Bitcoin for less energy, which is fantastic in terms of efficiency.
Yeah, not only less energy, but it allows, because of the total power usage, it also helps from the capital side too. You need less machines to produce the same hash rate. So yeah, something we maybe glossed over, to put it in perspective too, that many of the users, because I know many people are investors on this, that hash rate, so what all those transactions equate to at about 2 exahash right now, is approximately 10 Bitcoin a day that the system gets rewarded. So again, we're really driving efficiency, we're really driving sustainability, but that's how we function as a business, is through those Bitcoin rewards.
That is absolutely phenomenal, mate. And what would you say right now gives you the edge in this space? You've come into this space, you're familiar kind of with the landscape, especially around America. What is your secret sauce? Not what gives you that edge?
Yeah, our edge, I think, comes in two ways. One is we were very selective about the site that for the data center that we acquired, because of the nuclear power, but also we have a contract in place that's very low cost power because of the relationships that we have. So, and then the second stage, because we have always taken this with an energy first approach. I think it's likely that we are the most efficient miner as far as hash rate per megawatt that we use right now. That comes with using almost all with the latest generation miners. Now, with that said, a lot of our constituents and peers, they're treating it like an arms race right now. And we actually believe they're maybe focusing on the wrong side of the arms race, meaning buy as many machines as you can, stack them up as quick as you can, plug them in as quick as you can. And although we believe in growing rapidly, our belief is that the focus of the race should be more about sustainable growth of the energy systems behind it. If you buy a whole bunch of machines with nowhere to plug them in, or you buy a bunch of machines with expensive power or non-efficient power, or even heavily carbon-based power, those are all going to be things that are going to cause issues, in the long run. So really, sustainability for us means more than just sustainable power. It means sustainable strategy being put into place in how we grow. Sustainable growth by itself, so that we're leveraged the right way, but not over leveraged. We all have to plan for halving too, which, is coming up in a few years. And we're planning with that in mind at everything that we do.
And, on this kind of sustainability, you're pursuing sustainability. And right now it's one of the hottest topics in America when it comes to Bitcoin. The energy consumption of Bitcoin, the ESG narrative, as we call it.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's such a focus? Why do you think it became a focus in 2021? Why not in 2017 or 18 when Bitcoin was starting to take off and there was that ICO bubble?
Yeah. I think it actually has a lot to do with just it becoming mainstream. So, Bitcoin became something where, now you can go to Thanksgiving and your grandma might ask you about Bitcoin and what's it all about, right? Whereas you go back 2 years and it still hadn't quite, reached its peak. And it's interesting because, I sat on a panel on a conference just about a year ago. And as part of that panel, it was on sustainability. The conversation was just going. And, one of the key points that I've believed at from day one is that as miners, we have a responsibility to self-govern, or we will be governed. And, there was quite a discussion that happened around that. But it was, I did find that some of the peers, essentially felt that, no, we just need to be capitalists and we can think about that second. Well, Elon Musk tweets, 60 days later, and suddenly it's the narrative. And now there's congressional hearings around it. And our belief and what we've done is, and how we've always positioned ourselves, is first, we think it matters in a real way. Just being a good corporate citizen matters. And as a Bitcoin miner, our sources of energy are part of that. But two, when the governance comes for those who don't self-govern, we're already positioned. We would feel fine standing up and answering the questions about our energy sources, because we feel we've made the right decisions today. And so that if they're challenged tomorrow, we're already positioned. So, I think it's become an important narrative, but I think that there's key players, including us, that have always paid attention to it, knowing that not, at our core belief, we think it matters. Climate is a big discussion point, and I think that that's, leading the ESG narrative, and it's an easy thing to throw at Bitcoin miners just due to the sheer amount of energy that we use.
A sheer amount of energy, but also a sheer amount of scale. I
Mm.
think the energy arguments are often disproportionate, and the media tends to focus. I mean, I'm curious on your thoughts. Why does the media focus so much on Bitcoin's energy consumption and the ESG narrative? Why not? Why are we not, kind of focusing on TikTok as an example, or any of these social media apps that consume just as much energy worldwide? Why are we not focusing on internet cafes or just, traditional data centers that power Twitter and Facebook?
I actually 100% agree with you. When I'm having these conversations, I say, how much energy is used to host your selfies compared to doing Bitcoin? And you look at what Bitcoin's doing to the world and how it allows the unbanked to be banked, how it allows people access to real financial facilities and mechanisms. Even if it's, somebody working in the US that needs to transfer money, overseas to family, right now they have to go through banking systems who charge exorbitant fees instead of just getting, the ability for income back to their families. So, I think that Bitcoin has the ability to fix what may be a broken system, and instead we're throwing stones at it while people are hosting the same amount of power over selfies. So, I think that this is, something at its core that, we could obviously spend a lot of time on, but I 100% agree with you. I think you have to look at the benefits of what we're doing here and the impact of the entire world.
Well, you touched on a good point. Bitcoin is trying to fix a broken system. And if I touch on an analogy for a moment, when we do video game design, mechanism design, specifically designing MMOs, we have this concept called the sink and the tap. And the tap is kind of what is flowing, how money is flowing into the video game, into the economy. And the sink is where, players will spend that money. If you do not have enough sinks, you end up getting lots and lots of inflation, and then the currency essentially becomes worthless. And even with a lot of sinks, what can still happen is eventually so much money is being produced that, the currency becomes worthless still. I think what's interesting that we don't talk enough about with the Bitcoin narrative is Bitcoin has these perfect economic sinks. It is the data center, it is the infrastructure, it is the hardware. And you not only use your Bitcoin to purchase all of this equipment, but also fiat and capital, which is incredibly interesting to me. In this way, it's almost like fiat becomes the reserve currency of Bitcoin. But I think we don't talk enough about how pure Bitcoin's, economic design really is. There is a steady issuance, there's steady production of coins in exchange for energy. And you do have to do some form of work. You have to burn something to gain something. It is basic physics. So I agree. I think it is a little bit overblown. And I think part of the issue we have in this space is there's not enough metrics and information about kind of the environmental side of Bitcoin. And that is changing, I will say, 2022, and especially in 2021, we had the formation of the Bitcoin Mining Council that was really meant to be a data sharing initiative. We've had more research reports coming out from venture capitalists and dedicated research firms studying kind of the actual breakdown of energy of all these Bitcoin mining companies. But curious about, what is Cleanspark doing to help educate more on that on that environmental side of Bitcoin? Are you guys working on internal research reports, just, traditional podcasts?
Yeah.
And where do you see that going?
We're working at it in a few different ways. We've done, podcasts, we are trying to do education. What we've actually done recently is we've engaged with NASDAQ and their ESG advisory group to really form a strategy on educating the outside public. So, we're of course public. we trade on NASDAQ. And so we really went to, the market that we operate in as a company to try and facilitate, best in class solutions to both communicate and educate the outside world. So that's really how we're doing it, is both with the grassroots, but also with a larger, campaign of education. I think is going to be warranted, that we're still, creating and pulling together.
Fantastic. And then, I mean, let's talk a little bit more about, I do want to touch on one final thing. I would say Bitcoin has really advanced the state of energy efficiency when it comes to computing. Would you agree on that?
I really would, actually. I think that, you look at, there's never been a time where efficiency has been pushed with so much potential capital behind it. I'm going to go back to, a lot of what, maybe our history on the energy side. And something that's so interesting to me is, when you're building an energy project or you're trying to drive renewables forward, even for the most idealistic of people, it comes down to capital. People want to, do green energy. They want to buy solar. They want to do wind. They want to do all these things. And it still comes back to ROI. Never has there been a chance, both whether it's in the development of computing power or in the development of efficiency energy solutions or something like that, where the paybacks are so shortened and condensed that people can quickly be incentivized to make these advancements. So that's something else I really like about the ecosystem is, people are highly incentivized to make improvements related to efficiency of both the processing power and, the energy side of that. And really how they connect is what's creating the long-term value of the entire system.
Completely agree. Completely agree. All right, getting off the environmental part, I now want to touch on the two parts we don't see talked about a lot with Bitcoin, which is social and governance. Let's talk a little bit about the social merits of Bitcoin as an economic system as well. What is the value, would you say, with your background in kind of economics? What's the value of an incredibly transparent asset like Bitcoin?
That's a great question, because so much of it can be, ethereal. But, again, I'm going to go back to the fact that it really sets up a system of trust and reliability. The reason that all this infrastructure exists is it's, I like to call it the infrastructure of the future economy. What we're doing is we're creating a system that self-checks, and it doesn't involve somebody as a middleman. You look at, for example, what's happening in certain countries overseas where there's censorship. You tweet something against a local government, and the next thing you know, the government freezes your accounts. So now you can't function in society, whether this is what, we've seen this happen in Hong Kong recently. We've seen it happen in many other places. And so it becomes this way of, large regimes sometime oppressing, the free speech of their citizens. And, in a system where there isn't the ability to do that because of the transparency, because of you don't need a middleman that can freeze your bank account or freeze your assets. It puts you in a situation where you can continue to go on with your life. And again, I think that, sometimes the conversation gets overblown about the, what it means by just being a number on a blockchain, because the reality is these are real people. These are, your neighbors or the equivalent that are really using these systems. There's a lot of pros and cons about this, and over time, I'm sure it'll, we'll find better and better answers every day. That's what innovation is for. But, the ability to continue to transact without somebody taking a fee in the middle of it, for example, too, especially when you compare the fees of, we could take a system like Western Union, needing to send money to your family overseas. If, there's a lot of people in that situation, and the fees that are charged compared to the money that's being sent over is sometimes, just incrementally doesn't make sense. And so, you really start to break it down. And I think that that's one of the real values. You look at what happened in El Salvador, there was immediately a system of exchange and currency that could be used compared to another system with runaway inflation. And it was just a immediate bolt on. There didn't need to be a committee that needed to come through and create these complicated systems and people and processes. It was ready to go. So if you were a country like that with runaway inflation that needed a solution, it's there, it's ready, and that you don't need to build anything or raise taxes or do anything like that. So there's 100 ways to do it, but those are some of the things I look at that I'm probably most excited about when I look at the societal impact of Bitcoin in general.
And also, I will say the other thing that the Bitcoin industry has managed to do is it's tied economic incentives to engineering. And specifically, giving a past example, I don't think I ever would have gotten into this space and spent so much time learning about how a CPU works and how to optimize that and how to write assembly and C code if there wasn't an immediate financial reward for doing so. And so when we're talking about mining, you get a subsection of these engineers that in the world are really rare. They're called performance engineers. These are people that normally work on cars, phones, GPUs, video games. They're basically making things go faster. It's a very rare field, not so many folks there. In Bitcoin, one of the really cool social innovations that has happened is now you've actually trained an entire industry of people to care about low-level optimization and to start looking into things like, okay, here's a piece of hardware. How do I create my own firmware? How do I write my own firmware? How do I overclock this thing? How do I reduce power consumption as much as possible? And it's trained up for 10 years now an entire new generation of these performance engineers, which are coming into the workforce. And it's been able to do so by tying immediate rewards. So, you get a little bit of efficiency gain, and boom, that translates into real value in your pocket. It's kind of an addictive flywheel. So I think there's also all of these other social benefits that aren't really capitalized about what Bitcoin has done for humanity in general. The talent it's brought into this space, the innovation it's created, kind of the new way that it's taught people to care as well about privacy and systems and money and all of these kind of educational benefits.
Yeah. Just because you said money too, I want to point to something that I think is unique about what we do. And it's a little bit of a left turn on the conversation, but I think it might be important because you were talking about the way of getting an immediate reward and how that affects behavior. Bitcoin mining also is an incredibly efficient business because what happens is you're, producing something today and you're getting rewarded today for what you're doing. Many businesses, there's these long cycles that are really inefficient in how the capital is actually managed. And one of the things we do that I think is also different from our peers that we are strong believers in is efficient use of capital in addition to efficient use of energy. So, we believe in Bitcoin as a store of value, and we do accumulate Bitcoin as a company, but we also believe in using it as a medium of exchange. And there's a really long debate about exchange value versus, store of value, but we are different. Most of our constituents, they're not behaving like businesses. They're just behaving like miners, where if you were a gold miner, they would keep all the gold. We are putting a portion of that back to work to generate more Bitcoin to sustain our growth. And that's part of our sustainable strategy, because instead of just going into the fiat markets, whether it's through equity or debt funding, and accumulating large amounts of things that really you have to service later, we have a strategy of really producing when we want to be a top 5 Bitcoin miner. And in doing so, we want to produce the most value of any other miner to our shareholders, because one of the things that's happening too with this arms race is people are spending huge amounts of capital to try and generate, of course, profits for their shareholders. but you also have to look at how many shares do they have to issue. And I'm speaking to the investor groups that I know are listening right now. If somebody has to issue 100 million shares to raise the same amount of capital to push out instead of using the Bitcoin that's also sitting on their balance sheet, we believe in having less shares outstanding to produce the same return. If I have half the number of shares outstanding, I can produce the same return as somebody that has to be twice as big as me, consume twice as much power, and spend twice as much capital. So we believe that that also is a system that I think miners are getting slowly better and better at. But a thing that I think is different from an entrepreneurial mindset that we have versus maybe what I'll call a corporate mindset is really how that works. Miners used to always use the Bitcoin to fund their operation. Only now are these public miners starting to just accumulate only. And I think there's more efficient ways to get exposure to Bitcoin. If you really want to just have pure exposure to Bitcoin, go buy Bitcoin or go buy an ETF that holds Bitcoin. But we really believe that our investors are investing in the most efficient miner to produce the best return to them, and that's really our goal. And to do so, you have to use the full triangle of capital in the most efficient way, including using Bitcoin. And I think that that's one of those educational pieces that I think is important in how the incentive and reward system works in Bitcoin and the full cycle.
Exactly. Now, I don't think we talk enough about the incentive system, and I really hope in 2022 there are more discussions about this, more education done, because like you said, it is pure. It is incredibly pure. There's nothing like it anywhere else in the space. And so before we jump into any other topic, I do want to touch on the governance piece as well, because Bitcoin's decentralized. I mean, it's the narrative of why a lot of us originally got into this space, that Bitcoin has no one person controlling it. It is a public ledger run entirely by the miners, of which there are many. What would you say from your perspective and your background in economics, what benefit does a decentralized system like that offer? Especially like in contrast to our traditional financial systems.
Yeah. When you think about it, I'm going to use current examples of why I think decentralization matters. One thing is it's transparent and we have visibility in what's going on. It's truly a democracy. If we, as miners as a whole, as the Bitcoin, infrastructure as a whole, saw a need to change something, it would take a huge amount of us from all different parts of the entire world, not just, the US, to make any sort of changes, right? As, to bring in consensus. And right now, I'm going to look to, what everybody's concerned about, almost every day now. It's like everybody's waiting for the Fed notes. What is going to happen when, a few dozen people get behind closed doors to make a decision and then surprise us all. We're seeing inflation. We're seeing all these things happen. And I think it's just a pure method of governance that everybody is on the same page. We all know what's going to happen tomorrow with Bitcoin. We can all see how difficulty works. We know when, total hash rate comes up that the algorithm will adjust for the reward so that it happens in the same way. We know how the halving is going to work and how it's going to adjust in 3 years. It means we can plan for that. So it's just so pure. And, from a governance point of view, nothing is happening behind closed doors as it relates to the Bitcoin algorithm. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen wide out in the open for everybody to have a say, and we're all going to know what's going on.
Yep, exactly. Contrast that to, the traditional banking system where the entire development process of that is entirely a closed loop. Yeah. No one knows what is going on with banks. And it's not just the decision-making process in banks, it's also the entire software stack that a bank is running on. It is incredibly broken and scary from an engineering perspective. And, Bitcoin's real advantage is, yes, it's an open system, and that means principles of open source apply. There's so many eyes watching that code base every single day, and so many people are incentivized to secure it. and also incentivized to break it, which is that's how you get incredibly robust systems. So I do think you're right. It's the open and transparent nature of Bitcoin is fantastic. And also the accountability it creates. I mean, it's a public ledger after all. You can effectively see if someone is attempting to attack the chain or put pressure on the chain or doing something they should not be according to the rules of the protocol. I feel like the narrative of Bitcoin has become that it is a private ledger and that everything can kind of be obscured. But I will say this from, again, an engineer's perspective, it is close to impossible to hide money on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of the UTXO system and Bitcoin itself as a product.
Yeah. Something else on the governance side on decentralization, it shows a resilient system too, I think is, you look at what happened, Kazakhstan, they had their situation where, the internet went down and we did see hash rate drop, but it didn't change the ability for everybody to keep moving forward, because there's so many different miners that are all supporting this in all different parts of the world that, a single data center, a single power outage, or even an entire country, having an outage doesn't affect the ability for the blockchain to continue to succeed. And I think that's another, just wonderful thing about how the governance is set up is, sure, the decision-making process and whatever that may be, but there is no single point of failure. There's not, a data center somewhere that if it goes down, we're all up a creek. Instead, it's very robust and very secure at all times. The level of attack it would take to shut the system down would just be incredible. So.
And for anyone listening and concerned, no, quantum computing attacking Bitcoin is not anything that's going to happen now or probably 20 years in the future. So I really would not worry about that. I see that concern quite often. So Bitcoin's, it's a fantastic store of value, but its other main utility and reason it has value is it's a fantastic payment and remittance system. What do you think is holding back some of the more mainstream companies from fully adopting Bitcoin in their payment systems?
I actually think it's mostly education. But I also think it's just hard to get, big companies to move off of Go sometimes, and I think that if we can educate companies on how easy it is to transact with Bitcoin, we can accomplish a lot. So I think we have an educational process that we need to go through, but I think that there's still a fear-based. So, as the general population gets educated, I think that it will open the doors for companies to continue to, push. There's a lot of really exciting projects going on for payment systems. And I think that once it becomes ease of use, that's going to be the next step. So I actually think we're a lot closer than most people think. We're starting to see some level of adoption happening. And, I really expect it to be just right around the corner. So like I said, we're big believers in not it just being a store of value, but also as a medium of exchange to actually transact. And that's why we're using the Bitcoin on our balance sheet to continue to, build the company and buy machines.
There's a question, there was a comment here by one of our audience members that I did want to bring up. Roni says, we have seen that governments are able to shut down the internet nonetheless, right? I do want to talk a little bit about how there's so many now social initiatives in Bitcoin to make sure that this system is entirely robust and censorship free. So there are initiatives to create satellites so that the Bitcoin network can continue to function. There's actually initiatives to create a lo-fi mesh network for BTC miners so the chain could continue to run. And it's not infeasible that we might see in the future kind of ASICs actually being able to communicate with each other and create a mesh network. So then you have a truly robust payment system, one that is, if the internet goes down, it can continue to function just through radio waves are an option, or kind of RFI communication. I think that that's something that Bitcoin can provide that is phenomenal, and we need to talk more about. Where do you see the development of kind of mining and Bitcoin and hardware moving towards this year?
I'm actually really excited about a lot of the projects that we're, hearing about and, getting some sneak peeks behind, closed doors, to a large degree. I just think efficiency is going to keep being pushed. I really believe that liquid cooling is a big part of the next stage. You mentioned gaming and programming a little bit, but really you look at a gaming machine and how it works and how the liquid cooling system is fully self-contained. That's really where I see the next stage of Bitcoin mining going, is where sure we can do liquid cooling in these big tubs, but what we're essentially doing is we're taking an air-cooled machine, removing the fans and putting it into these systems. I really think we're going to see more closed loop systems being built where it's, they're designed for liquid cooling from the beginning. And that's going to allow us to overclock. It's going to allow us to push this hardware further. And the other benefit too of liquid cooling is it's going to allow us to also extend the life of some of these machines. So the S19 in a lot of ways is considered the most efficient machine right now. So its processing power when liquid cooled, like you said at the beginning, goes up 20 to 50%. But I think that we're going to see that even pushed further. I think we're going to see some interesting things where we, although the box, as you pointed to with the way the fans are, is one of the most efficient ways to air cool. I think we're going to see form factors changing for these machines. I think we're going to see a lot of innovation in the methods of cooling, both air cooled and liquid cooled. And it's just going to get us further and further. That's, part of our strategy is actually to pay attention to energy growth so that as innovation happens, and it is happening very rapidly, we're always looking to buy the most efficient option or put into play the most efficient option that exists. Because if you take the other side and you take the arms race of buy as many machines as you can and get them delivered in a year, what's to say they're not going to be obsolete in a year, right? So we're paying really, really close attention to this, but I really think the hardware is the next stage. I think hardware and the method of cooling and really pushing the efficiency, the watts per terahash, I think we're going to see some really dramatic things in the coming year to 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely fantastic. Well, Zach, thank you so much for your insights today.
Guys, this was incredible. Thank you so much. And since I have a little time, I'm going to ask 2 selfish questions, if that's okay, to end us off. Starting with you, Kristy, putting you on the hot seat now. I actually would love to end with one horror story that you've had in mining and one success story that you look back on and smile.
Oh, a horror story. I mean, there's a few to pick from. Let's see which is appropriate for this audience. One of the mining farms that I was working on back in 2018, we had a recurring issue. So we were based out of, to set the stage, we were based out of North Carolina. This mining farm was in North Carolina, and specifically in a very rural region where there is a lot of wildlife coming in and out. One of the issues we had was cattle would keep wandering into our data center from kind of the neighboring farms. They'd get out and they'd just kind of go to where the warmth is, especially in wintertime. So we had a recurring issue with animals coming into our data center, and we eventually had to hire security guards to corral them and get them out. What ended up happening is I'm sitting in a meeting with one of our key partners, and I get this message on my phone, and it's like, Kristy, we need your help. The data center is on fire. And what had actually happened was that a snake had crawled for warmth onto one of the generators, shorted the entire thing, and that had caused a fire. And that was immediate panic. I mean, you've got 50 megawatts up in smoke and flames. That is absolutely terrifying. So that was my horror story, my recent one. all because of a snake.
Oh, God. And what about a success story? Or actually, while you're thinking about it, Zach, let's hear your horror story, and then Kristy, success, and Zach, success.
It's funny to kind of look back at things, again, I think the last year has been its own kind of horror story in the sense of supply chain. I know that seems like a cop-out these days, but supply chain has been an incredibly difficult thing to manage, to the point where you have to, you're buying something and then it's supposed to be there in 3 weeks and then it's there in 10 weeks instead. And you just navigating this whole process, especially, over the summer and late fall, it seemed like you would wake up every morning to find out something was delayed another week when they promised it was going to be there tomorrow. So, nothing as dramatic as snakes or anything, but I've definitely been doing this a lot, not quite as long as Kristy, but yeah, the supply chain's been its own kind of nightmare for the last year.
Across industries there for sure, or consumers. I'm still waiting on a couple clothes to arrive for about a month and a half. That is a low level priority compared to you. However, definitely across the board. And Kristy, if we could end, what do you look back on and it makes you smile, whether you solved a problem, your team solved a problem, or whatever strikes you?
I'm still really proud of kicking off the innovation in the firmware industry. I mean, when I look back on my career, that is what is kind of, everyone has that pin in the balloon moment where they're kind of like, wow, this is the one thing I've accomplished that I'm really proud of, and that's mine. Started with the S9 and being able to optimize the S9 so that my company at the time was the most efficient on the market. That is my proudest moment. We were able to beat out the manufacturer specs by close to 40% with just air cooling, it was really cool.
That's awesome. And Zach, end us off with something that made you smile.
I think it's probably what, everybody on my team is most proud of. And that's, when we started, we only had 165 to 195 petahash, and we grew so quickly. We've been in this a year, and to be a top 5 on a production basis for publicly traded miners has been a big deal. But as part of that, what we did is, we bought a data center that a part of our property was just an empty field. And it was an empty field with kind of, some dead trees and some, stuff that had fallen over an old building. And to clear it out and turn it into what we saw in that picture earlier, to really take something that existed on paper and turn it into a high efficiency Bitcoin mining data center in a city that right now, with everything that's gone on, was high unemployment. We were able to bring jobs in. We were able to bring something into a city and part of a tax base that actually is really meaningful to the community at large. So for me, that's what it really is taking a empty field and drawings on a piece of paper and turning it into something that's bigger than ourselves and the impact of the community around it.
What a perfect closing, Zach. That's amazing. Everybody, thank you so much, Kristy and Zach. This was an absolutely amazing conversation. Thank you to all who are joining our first Spotlight webinar. As everybody here is maybe aware, we are very committed to leading with education at Valkyrie, and we hope to be a resource to you. So stay tuned for more deep dive learning opportunities with our Spotlight series and other programming opportunities. But Zach and Kristy, this was really enlightening for me, and I think all the attendees on the call. So thank you again. Everybody, have a great day.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.